you can't see patients who are sick, who had appointments scheduled, to patients with infection, bronchitis, what have you, change in temperature and weather and moving around can lead to other complications, patients with back injuries, other kind of orthopedic problems. And there's a little of a psychological trauma and stress involved. Fortunately, we had nobody in our close observation unit who was really sick today.
Hold on to both the litter and the gurney
Gently, that's a
Where's their shoes?
All right. That's a good heaving speed.
With this program, it brings them up from where they are to where they need to be so that they are ready for the first grade experience educationally when they are ready for it, rather than just pushing them in the first grade because they're 6 years old.
AIDS is a hard disease to catch. That's a fact, say the experts. And it is absolutely, without a doubt, impossible to catch AIDS by giving blood.
You cannot get AIDS by donating blood. And the reason that you can't is all of the equipment that is used is completely disposable.
Still, blood supplies in Oklahoma City are down to only 80% of what's normal. Somehow donors are still afraid, needlessly afraid. And there is still fear, too, about the safety of the nation's blood supply. That also is a needless fear. AIDS is a disease spread through sexual contact and dirty needles. The days when it could be spread through transfusions are gone, thanks to an antibody test. The chance of receiving contaminated blood today is almost nil.
The risk would be 1 or less than 1 in 25 million donations, and there are not 25 million donations in a year.
With those kinds of statistics, experts hope the public will be reassured. And the experts also hope that blood donors will realize, once and for all, that AIDS absolutely cannot be contracted at the local blood bank. Dan Slocum, News 4.
This is really important for us. What is happening right now here, because it's gonna help us a lot to do something for our country that they really need our help right now.
Greg Farha has made it through the tough times. When many of his competitors in the North Park Mall were having liquidation sales, Greg was able to cut his overhead and tighten the budget belt to stay in business. Retailers all over the state have had to resort to extreme measures to fend off creditors. Things are so bad in the retail business that many bankers refuse to loan money to start new retail businesses. If Greg had to start over, things would be different.
I would go into business again, but I would have to do it with a lot more money. I couldn't do it what I did. I couldn't do it today the way I did it in 1980 or 1977. There's no way. Couldn't make it.
Vacant restaurants are a common sight across central Oklahoma. Many lenders say the restaurant business is the toughest to be in right now. Competition is tough. There are a lot of new restaurants popping up, and many won't make it through the first year. Executives with the Small Business Administration are discouraging applicants that want to open a retail store or restaurant. But if your heart is set on one of these businesses, be prepared to answer tough questions and have plenty of capital.
How is that particular business going to be in this particular location under this particular economic set of facts that we're faced with today? It would have to be very, very good. And even with the requisite experience, we would probably require a pretty substantial equity injection on the part of the applicant before we would seriously consider the loan.
So who will the SBA lend money to?
Law firms, accounting firms, engineering firms, maybe veterinarians, which is kind of in the medical field. The medical field is good and probably perform better than any class of business loans that we have on the books.
Not everybody that uses a chainsaw is a lumberjack or a woodman. They can help you get a lot of work done in a hurry, but you got to know how to use them safely.
I really love the outdoors, and I like to use a chainsaw. And I also know its value, but I also know some of its danger. In inexperienced or careless hands, a chainsaw can be a potentially lethal mechanical monster. There's really no need for this kind of a problem, but every year when it gets cold and people start cutting wood, somebody gets tangled up in one of those things. A chainsaw won't show much discretion about what it's going to cut. It'll cut you just as well as it'll cut a birch log. I'd like for you to hear some safety tips from a fellow who uses one all the time, my son Hank.
It's a skill you have to develop, and the best way to do that is work with someone who knows how to do it. Learn what kind of problems can develop, because the chain is going real fast. If that tip catches anything, the saw will fly back. That's the most common injury.
Also, a lot of injuries are caused by a chainsaw that simply isn't sharp enough. A blunt chainsaw won't cut straight, and it bounces around. And if it's dull, you're going to have to apply more body weight to push through the log. You take a real chance in getting unbalanced on your feet.
Now take good care of your chainsaw and treat it with a lot of respect. It'll take care of you. I'm Dr. Red Duke.
Now, I realize I'm always talking about eating good food and trying to work a little exercise into your daily routine just so you feel pretty good. I want to introduce you to a fellow who's a perfect example of the benefits of just such a program. His name is Delano Zwar, and he'll tell you that he's never been sick a day in his life. That is until he reached the age of 42 when he suffered a severe heart attack.
I didn't think it could happen to anybody at that age. Really, I hadn't paid much attention to it.
But after a 20-day stay in the hospital, when he really had to take a look at himself and where he'd been, he began to reevaluate his lifestyle and what led up to that heart attack.
I had some bad habits in my life, and first of all, I love to work, and I've always loved my job, and I had a lot of stress. I smoked an awful lot. I drank an awful lot of coffee. I was overweight.
But his close brush with death has given Delano Zwar some reason to really appreciate his second chance at life.
I decided that my family was more important than my job, and that has to come first. I walk 2 miles mostly every day. I've cut back on the high cholesterol foods. I've cut out the salt.
It's also important to emphasize that while he pays a lot more attention to his health and his lifestyle, he by no means approaches life as a cardiac cripple. In fact, Delano will tell you he's never felt better in his life. I think we can learn a lot from a guy like Delano. But then the key is to incorporate it into our own lives. I'm Dr. Red Duke. You know, of all the reasons for which we have to stand in awe, a new life has to be the miracle of all miracles. And we docs know a lot about the processes by which these little fellows are formed, but we too have to marvel at how right things have to be for this thing to occur.
Can I see it?
Irish fisherman is one who can truly testify to this miracle of life. The fishermen's tried to have a child for 7 years before they had Michael.
I think he's brilliant and beautiful. And I just marvel at him. There are times when I look at him and I still can't believe he's here.
Now you can help ensure that your kids will one day enjoy this miracle of life by keeping close tabs on problems in their reproductive system development during adolescence. These problems are easiest to detect in women. Now, for example, severe cramping and irregular periods could be a sign of minor problems in the reproductive system. And severe acne is another sign that the reproductive system may not quite be in sync.
Acne, definitely, because that is simply an indication that she has an excess of male sex hormone, which in turn interferes with normal ovarian function.
You know, it's really a good idea to keep close tabs on the function of your reproductive system, even if you don't plan to have babies. Abnormalities in the reproductive function can represent severe medical problems. Just a good idea to pay close attention to this issue as well. Take good care of yourself. I'm Dr. Red Duke.
Something which we hope that we can accomplish some good things for the city and at least find out. Well, I hope the people come to it. I hope they listen to each other. I hope they put forward their ideas about what their visions are for the city, what they'd like to see the city be, and what they'd like for us to do, so that the committee can then distill that and give us some response so that we can get some feel for what directions we ought to go.
You got to understand, if you're going to keep on smoking and eating all that fatty food, in all likelihood, your arteries are going to get stopped up, including the arteries to your heart. And it's going to look like that, and you're going to have a heart attack.
The symptoms usually include A, no symptoms until you have a heart attack, or B, some vague chest pressure, or C, even nausea or vomiting. Sweating, shortness of breath with exercise. All of those can be symptoms of heart disease.
Now, if you experience any of the symptoms we've talked about, then you're going to have some tests to be sure exactly what's going on. One of the primary tests in that regard is a coronary arteriogram. You can expect to have a catheter placed in an artery either in your groin or in your arm. Now, this long catheter is threaded through these big arteries up to the little bitty ones that go into your heart. Once the catheter is in the right location, some dye is injected. This allows the cardiologist to not only see on the fluoroscope the moment that the dye is flowing through the arteries, but also to make permanent x-rays to be studied later. Now, anybody can have coronary artery disease, but if you're still smoking or eating too much, you got a real problem. I don't think it's worth the risk. I'm Dr. Red Duke. Now, you got to understand, one of the risks that you got to accept if you're going to keep smoking and eating all that fatty food is that your arteries are liable to get stopped up. Now, when that happens in your heart, that's called coronary artery disease. And one of the newer treatments of this type of problem, really kind of interesting. This technique is known as coronary artery angioplasty. With the patient sedated but still awake, a catheter with a small balloon on the end of it is routed through the major artery up to the affected coronary artery in the heart. Once the catheter is in the right place, the balloon is inflated and the plaque is pressed out into the wall of the affected artery, thus allowing a more free flow of blood into the heart once again.
Now, it doesn't make the blockage go away per se, but it does reduce the severity of the blockage and allows the patient much more blood flow to the heart muscle so that the patient could exercise and lead a normal life.
Like all other great ideas, coronary angioplasty is a relatively simple procedure. Of course, that is, you got to know how to do it right. For sure, it's a lot easier on the patient than having to have an open heart surgery. But not everybody qualifies to have this kind of procedure done. Hopefully, you'll change your lifestyle so that you won't need any kind of procedure. I'm Dr. Red Duke. I'm sure you've heard something about a coronary artery bypass operation. Well, this actually involves opening up the chest and doing an open heart operation. And actually, it's benefited lots of folks. Patients with only 1 or 2 blockages within the arteries of the heart can frequently be helped by the relatively simple procedure known as coronary angioplasty. But those folks who have multiple blockages or a total block of one of the major arteries usually require coronary bypass operation.
Bypass surgery is sort of mysterious, but it really is like directing traffic. If there's an intersection that's broken, then you drive around the block. It's the same thing with bypass surgery. If there's a blocked artery, then they take a piece of vein out of the leg and reroute the blood flow from the main artery, the aorta, around the blockage and insert the vein, sew the vein into the artery, the coronary artery, beyond the blockage. So the blood just runs around the blockage and down to the heart muscle where it's needed.
Nowadays, with the proficiency and skill of the cardiac surgeons and the cardiologists, you can expect to tolerate an operation of this type just fine and do better than you did before you had it. But I might suggest to you that if you clean up your lifestyle, you might not have to have anything at all. I'm Dr. Red Duke.
We have several of the state finalists with us tonight.
We didn't make a bet. Hi, how you doing? Oh, you didn't really buy something.
One more time on there. And I'm
on the card?
Yes.
People realize with the uncertain tax structure that owning a business of their own is something that should be explored if they've got a brain cell and they have a little working capital.
I'm interested in making money, one of the ways to make money is find out what people are interested in and what's new on the market and go in that direction.
And there was about 4 or 5 people up there on the stairwell there, and they couldn't get out because of the flames. So I took off my jacket and shielded them from the flames and everything. I pulled them all down, and I made about 2 or 3 trips and just grabbed a couple at a time. And the flames were coming out of the doorway, so that's one of the reasons why they couldn't get by. I just took off my jacket, put it around them, brung them all down.
When you got a living, that's the only way you got to make a living. I mean, you better be worried.
You got a family?
Yeah, I got 2 little boys and a wife.
Coal industry is a big industry in eastern Oklahoma where you have high unemployment. I think they have 17% in this county, and we're about the only industry in this county.
Two boys hunting in this remote area near I-40 in Rockwell stumbled across Patterson's body on Monday. He had been shot in the face at close range. Patterson was reported missing that same day by school officials. The 33-year-old Moore resident taught 9th and 10th grade math at Central High. He was highly esteemed by colleagues and known as one of the most popular teachers by students.
He was so nice, and he's a great teacher, and everybody was just, I mean, the whole school was in an uproar. I mean, today was so bad. I mean, I wish it didn't even happen.
Sadness and a feeling of helplessness from the staff.
You know, it's a very frustrating thing, and it's a very disappointing time for the teachers and for the students themselves.
And for the parents.
You hear about some things like this in Chicago or Los Angeles or something, you can live with that somehow. You know, it's more remote, but when it's something right here in your own front yard, it's pretty scary.
When class resumes tomorrow, a substitute teacher will stand at the front of Mr. Patterson's math class, and students will attend that class still horrified over what's happened. A permanent replacement will be hired as soon as one can be found, but if you ask the students and teachers here, they'll tell you Rick Patterson can never be replaced. Dan Slocum, News 4 in Moore.
In testimony today, the Corporation Commission was pictured as being more concerned with protecting oil companies than stopping pollution. Senators were told of 15 and 16-month waits to get action on oil field pollution problems. Some of the harshest words came from Lindsay City Manager Bill Cowan, who has been trying for more than a year to get the commission to do something about pollution that's threatening his town's water supply. Instead, he says, he was treated like the bad guy.
In our estimation, we haven't been treated right at the commission. It seems like that we're the bad guy, and all we've done is find pollution, and we can't understand why in the world that you're put on the defense so much to where you have to use your own funds to find information.
Others had similar stories. A noble farmer told of trying to get the commission to close a well that was polluting his land, a plea he says the commission virtually ignored.
Even after the district supervisor recommended the state office that they not use it, they allowed him to come back up and prepare to use it again.
And the chairman of the Senate committee says he believes inaction and long delays at the commission are not uncommon.
These are examples of many continuance, continuing through the Corporation Commission and lasting into 2 to 3 years' time before they are ever settled, and some of them are still not.
In another development, the commission's top hearing officer, Robert Goldfield, has resigned. His resignation comes just weeks after he was criticized at the hearings for allegedly trying to influence the decisions of trial examiners. Goldfield reportedly has denied his resignation has anything to do with the Senate hearings. Jeff Fowler, News 4 at the state capitol.
Our central nervous system is the most complex computer and intricate electrical circuitry on Earth. But remember, it too is made up of living cells. To understand better Lou Gehrig's disease, or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, it's important to look at the anatomy of the spinal cord. If you cut the spinal cord in half and look at it end on in the bony vertebra, you can see easily what is called the gray matter and the white matter. In the gray matter, at the front of the cord, live the cells that send out information to your muscles to tell them what to do. In ALS, the cells in this area begin to randomly degenerate.
The patients will develop weakness of the muscle. Because that nerve begins to shrivel, the muscles will also shrivel, and it'll tend to have quivering of the muscles as it tries to revive. We call that fasciculation. But the most prominent symptom is weakness and muscle fasciculation, as well as atrophy or shrinking.
It's important to emphasize that ALS is an extremely rare disease. In all likelihood, if you experience such a symptom, it's not ALS, but some type of pressure on a nerve, like a direct injury, pressure from arthritis, or a herniated disc. But it's really important to deal with such a problem as early as possible, because if you delay this therapy too long, then complete recovery may not be possible. I'm Dr. Red Duke. We hear a lot about Alzheimer's disease these days. You know, it's characterized by a loss of the ability to carry out rather simple functions. Alzheimer's disease is caused by the degeneration of specific nerve cells within the brain. These cells seem to deal primarily with memory, judgment, the ability to speak, and the ability to recognize situations, objects, or persons that should be familiar. There is some suggestion that Alzheimer's disease is caused by a virus. But there's also some evidence to suggest the fact that it's a genetic abnormality. In most instances, Alzheimer's disease begins in people around the age of 60.
When it does occur in a younger age group, as in fact with olders, we make sure that other diseases, particularly treatable form of dementias, are not present. And there are treatable dementias, such as those with vitamin deficiencies or other metabolic disorders.
Another extremely important condition that can be confused with Alzheimer's disease is that of over-medication. Older folks take more medicine because they have more diseases. It's not unusual for an older person to experience an oversensitivity to a medication or to become confused and take too much of a prescribed medication. Identifying and correcting the problem of over-medication may very well eliminate a lot of symptoms. Although we don't know the cause for Alzheimer's disease, an incredible amount of information has been learned about Alzheimer's. And there's no cure at the moment, but I'm told by the experts research is looking promising. I'm Dr. Red Duke. Multiple sclerosis is a disease of the central nervous system that is caused by the degeneration of some very specific cells and results in an inability to transmit information to and from the brain. The central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord, and the nerves that come out of the base of the brain and the spinal cord that allow you to feel and tell your muscles what to do. These long cell fibers are arranged in bundles much like the wires in a telephone cable. As you know, each of the wires in this cable has its own insulation, and if something causes that insulation to break, you're going to get a short circuit. In a crude sort of way, that's what happens with multiple sclerosis.
And as a result, patients will then have blindness in an eye, or they have incoordination, or they can't speak well, or they have difficulty in walking, so that multiple parts of the brain can become affected. And when we look at these brain specimens, they look hardened, or what we call sclerotic, and hence the term multiple sclerosis.
Occasionally, only one area of the body will be affected by this disease, or the disease may take on a more benign form that is really not very debilitating. MS tends to occur most frequently in young adults, but a significant number of patients develop it after the age of 50. In spite of the debilitation suffered by patients with MS, with current medical management techniques, life expectancy approaches normal. At the moment, there's no known cure, but again, I am told research looks very promising. I'm Dr. Red Duke.